It is Thursday, January 29th, 2026.
Mm-hmm.
The markets are open. The algorithms are, doing their thing, moving capital around the globe in nanoseconds.
The machine is humming.
The machine is humming. The sun is up over Ottawa, though. Looking at the reports, it's hidden. There's this gray hanging sleet.
Fitting.
It is, isn't it? To the casual observer, everything seems normal. The machinery of the state, it seems to be grinding into a new day. But, well, we're not casual observers.
Wow.
We're here to listen to the engine. And what I'm hearing, or maybe more accurately, what I'm failing to hear, is the hum of consent.
The feedback loop.
It's gone. There's just this silence hanging over the North today. And I have to say, it's louder than any protest I've ever analyzed. It's heavier than the smoke from any riot.
It's the sound of a vacuum.
Exactly. We have the source documents right here in front of us. We've got the press release from Reuters, just a little string of text that marks the end of, well, an entire era. And we have the manifesto. They're calling it the Belléglise proposition.
Calling it a manifesto. I think that implies it's a statement of intent, a bid for public approval.
Right.
I'd characterize it very differently. It's a technical manual. It's a schematic for a machine that has already been switched on.
That is precisely what we're here to determine. Our mission today it's an autopsy, really. We're dissecting a democracy that didn't die with a bang or even a whimper. It died with a shrug. We're looking at this group, the Republican Brotherhood for a new era, claiming the Canadian presidency.
A claim made into an empty room.
We're looking at the man behind it, Mike the Fiend Belléglise. But most importantly, we are looking at that empty space, the space where the people used to be, the silence. Because this deep dive isn't just about politics.
No, it's so far beyond that.
It's about the industrialization of human extinction, all in the name of survival.
And to even call this a political shift is to fundamentally misunderstand what happened.
How so?
We're not looking at a change in policy. We're looking at a system failure.
A glitch.
A glitch. The moment where the operating system of society stopped recognizing user input, the will of the people, and it executed the last known command in its code.
Which was?
Survive at any cost.
Survive. You use that word and it just hangs there, doesn't it? It's so heavy. But looking through the Belléglise proposition, this blueprint for the new administration, survival feels like a euphemism.
It's a sanitized term for something primal.
For something grotesque. We're talking about a document that proposes, and I'm quoting, managed demographic stabilization.
Sounds harmless. Sounds like bureaucratic jargon.
It sounds like something you'd hear at a zoning meeting about parking spaces, right? But when you peel back the layers, which is what we're going to do, it reads like a suicide note.
It is a suicide note.
For the entire concept of free will.
Yes. But here's the distinction. It's a suicide note signed by the species, not by the individual. And that, right there, that is the horror that we have to confront today. This wasn't a coup, not in the way we think of it.
No tanks in the streets.
No tanks. The Brotherhood didn't storm Parliament with bayonets. They just walked through an open door.
A door left open by what?
By what I would call an ontological collapse of the electorate. They ceased to believe they were real politically, so they vanished.
Okay, let's interrogate that immediately. The silent revolution. That's the headline they're using.
A revolution of absence.
The Reuters release states it clearly. Republican Brotherhood for a new era secures Canadian presidency amid record voter abstention. But it's the number. I want us to just stare at this number for a second. 97%.
The voice.
It's more than a void. 97%. It's an abdication of existence, politically speaking.
Yes.
In a democracy, your vote is your voice. It's the proof that you exist as a political entity. So if 97% of the population just stays home, what does that say?
What does that mean?
Yeah. Is this apathy? Is it just people being lazy? Was it the weather? Or is this something deeper, a collective, maybe subconscious resignation to fate?
I think it's the silence of a terminal patient who has decided to stop fighting the treatment. You have to understand the context of the glitch.
Okay.
Democracy relies on a core assumption that the participant believes their input affects the output. It's a feedback loop.
I press the button, the light changes.
Exactly. But if 97% of the population abstains, they are not saying, I don't care. They're saying, the machine functions without me.
And the terrifying part is...
They were right. The machine did function.
Yeah.
It just functioned in a way nobody anticipated.
Let's break down the mechanics of that, because I think a lot of people would assume, well, if nobody votes, the election is invalid, that there's some kind of, quorum required for reality to take hold. But that's not how it works, is it?
No. The code doesn't require a quorum of conscience. It only requires a calculation of integers.
So it's just math.
It's just math. The first-past-the-post system is a mechanism designed for a world of active participants. It assumes competition.
Right, Party A versus Party B.
But when one side, or in this case almost all sides, simply withdraw from the field, the system doesn't pause. It doesn't ask what's wrong. It calculates the remaining variables.
So if you have a room of 100 people and 97 of them fall asleep,
the 3 who are still awake aren't just a minority anymore. They are the undisputed masters of the room. Their will becomes the total will.
And that remaining variable was the 3%. The 3% who did show up. And who were they? They were the Republican Brotherhood, a fringe group, a radical ideology that in any healthy body politic would be what? A localized infection, a statistical anomaly. But
Here, the body had no immune system. The host was comatose. So the 3% didn't just win. They became the totality of the expressed political will.
And the system just processed that.
This is why I keep calling it a glitch. The system is designed to amplify the voice of the people. But when the people are silent, the system does what it has to do. It amplifies the only noise it can find.
And in this case, that noise was the rationalization protocol. It was Mike Belléglise.
It was the fiend.
So we have a mandate without consent. Or do we? I mean, does the word mandate even apply here? This is what I really want to push on.
That's a good question.
Can you actually govern a people who have already, for all intents and purposes, ghosted you? The Brotherhood claims victory. Belléglise is taking office. But does the mechanism of the state have the moral authority to function when 97% of its fuel source, the people, is disconnected?
They're still looking for moral authority in what has become a purely mechanical process. That's the error.
Okay.
The state, at this point, does not require moral authority to function. It just requires administrative access. And Belléglise has that access now.
The keys to the kingdom.
The keys to the machine.
Yeah.
The 97% didn't just stay home. They essentially signed a blank check to reality. They said, whatever happens, happens.
And what happened was the fiend.
Reality it collapsed into the shape of the Brotherhood because there was no other pressure holding it back. It was the path of least resistance.
Then let's look at the shape of this new reality. Let's look at the architect. Mike the Fiend Belléglise.
Architect of the void.
The Reuters report calls him the party ideologist. The proposition calls him the ideological architect. But I can't get past the name. The Fiend.
It creates a cognitive dissonance, doesn't it? It
Well,
feels
yeah.
incorrect, like a corrupted file name.
It's absurd. Political leaders, they always cloak themselves in benevolence. They choose names like the Peacemaker or the Builder or, something at least neutral.
Something palatable.
But the Fiend, I have to ask, what is the psychology of a leader who actively embraces a title like that? Is it some kind of dark irony? Is it a warning label? What is it?
I think it's an act of radical honesty.
Honesty.
In the era of the glitch, where everything feels fake, the pretense of morality becomes the biggest lie of all.
Yeah.
Belléglise is telling you exactly what he is.
He's the monster.
He's the necessary monster. In his view, he's not a villain. He's the only adult in a room full of children who are eating all the rations and setting fire to the furniture.
So a fiend is just someone willing to do the dirty work.
A fiend is someone who operates outside the bounds of polite society, outside the traditional framework of empathy. He's signaling that he has discarded the illusion of morality for what he sees as the brutality of arithmetic.
The brutality of arithmetic, that's a chilling phrase, but it seems to fit the text of this proposition perfectly.
It does.
Let's look at the ideology section. The Brotherhood's stated goal is, and I quote, the dissolution of chaotic individualism.
The elimination of the random variable,
Yeah.
the human.
And they want to reformat society into a single congregation.
You have to note the terminology there. It's religious language applied to a secular structure. That is not an accident.
No, it's all over this document. They refer to the Supreme Administrator, to Belléglise, as the pious pope of secular governance.
A complete paradox.
It's a paradox that demands to be unpacked. How can you be a pious pope of the secular? What does that even mean?
It means it's the ultimate convergence of church and state, except the church is the machine. In the absence of God, the state becomes the new provider of meaning, the arbiter of life and death, the sole vessel of salvation.
So bureaucracy becomes theology.
Exactly. By using a term like pious pope, they are elevating administrative logic to the level of divine will. The citizen is no longer a voter with agency.
The citizen is.
A penitent, a sinner whose original sin is merely existing, is reproducing without authorization. And the state is the only thing that can offer penance.
And that penance is managed demographic stabilization.
The new sacrament.
Which brings us to the meat of this document. The proposition is divided into phases. Phase 1 is titled The Furnace of Renewal.
Or, as the subheading calls it, the sky.
The sky. The document proposes the processing of all deceased persons through what they call carbon-neutral cremation facilities.
Okay, so far that sounds efficient, maybe even ecologically sound.
Right. If it stopped there, it would just be policy. Efficient, perhaps a little cold, but standard. But it's the next step that it stops your heart. They want to capture the particulate matter, the ash, and use it for atmospheric seeding.
The ashes of the unborn generations, that's the phrase they use.
That is the specific, poetic, horrifying phrase. Ashes of the unborn generations. They want to create artificial cloud cover to combat global warming, using the remains of the people they are systematically removing from the population. I want to push on the why here. Why this specific method? Is it just about efficiency? Or is there something deeply performative about this?
It is entirely performative. It is the grotesque poetry of their new state religion. Think about the symbolism.
I am. Fix.
You are literally blocking out the sun with the bodies of your ancestors and your children. The sun, the source of all life, the source of warmth, and also, in their view, the source of the heat death they fear, is being deliberately occluded by the dead.
It turns the sky into a tomb.
Or, from their perspective, it turns the sky into a shield. The sky blackens not with death, but with salvation. That is their claim.
Salvation from what? From nature itself?
Yes. They are arguing that the natural world, the sun, the light, the warmth, has become hostile. It's an enemy. Therefore, safety requires an artificial darkness.
It's the ultimate existential entrapment.
It is. You can't even look up at the sky without seeing the administration's work. You can't see the stars at night without looking through a veil of your own dead.
It effectively ends the concept of day.
Yeah.
The document explicitly says day turns to night so that the species may survive. And I just have to ask the question, is a world without the sun worth saving? If we have to turn the entire planet into a crypt just to keep living on it, what exactly are we preserving?
You're asking a human question?
I am.
The Brotherhood is providing a systemic answer. To the system, quality of life is a secondary variable. It's noise in the data. Duration of existence is the primary variable.
So 1,000 years in the dark is a win.
To the system, it's a win. The Brotherhood believes the light of nature is too dangerous. Chaos, heat, random growth, these are threats. The artificial darkness they're creating is controlled, it's administered. It is, in their logic, safe.
Safety at the cost of the light. But okay, let's look at what happens on the ground then, under this new black sky. Phase 2. The parish system of biological accountability.
The containment.
A marish. There's that word again. It's meant to sound gentle. A religious community, a place of care.
Yeah.
But here, it's a holding pen. The document calls for the relocation of all females of reproductive age to centralized administrative zones, and from there, transfer to eugenic administration concentration facilities.
They don't even hide the term. Concentration facilities.
They don't, and that's what's so shocking to me. Usually a regime like this would try to soften the language, call it a resettlement area or a safety zone.
Right.
They use the word concentration. They are deliberately invoking the darkest history of the 20th century and repurposing it as a tool for the 21st.
They're owning it.
And I refuse to let the term parish stand without exposing the prison underneath. This is incarceration based on nothing but your biology.
It's more than incarceration. In a prison, you are there because of an action you committed, a choice you made.
Right.
In the parish, you are there because of what you are, because of a potential you hold inside you. This is the concept of state stewardship, of biological functions. The woman is no longer a human subject with rights and autonomy.
She's a what? A biological asset.
A biological asset to be managed. Her womb has been nationalized. It's now property of the state.
Nationalized property, that is a truly terrifying way to put it.
But it's the accurate reading of the text. They say their existence continues, their unregulated reproduction ends. The Brotherhood views reproduction as a chaotic variable.
A glitch in the demographic data.
Precisely. And to fix the glitch, they have to remove the variable of human unpredictability. They can't stop women from existing. So they must stop them from being women in the biological sense. They are stripping away the potential for the future to happen by accident.
It all comes back to their goal, the end of chaotic individualism. And here we see the mechanism: biometric cataloging, citizen identification codes. This is the total digitization of the human being. You are no longer a name, you are a code in a database that decides if your bloodline is allowed to continue.
And for the vast majority of people in those facilities, the decision has already been made. The parish isn't a waiting room. It's a processing center.
Which leads us to the inevitable logical conclusion of their entire project.
Yes.
Phase 3, the steel solution.
The procedure.
This section, this is where all the abstraction just falls away and the industrial horror begins. We need to talk about the mark. The document describes an administrative identification mark seared onto the right hand and the forehead.
With a dermal laser?
And they call it
the mark of the administrative beast.
They actually call it that, the mark of the administrative beast. Again, the brazenness of it is just staggering.
It is.
In any other context, that is a direct reference to the Antichrist, to the end of days from the book of Revelation. Here, they're claiming it as a sacred symbol.
It's a baptism into the new church.
The end of chaotic fertility, the beginning of managed biology. They're not hiding the dystopian nature of it. They're sanctifying it.
This goes right back to Belléglise as the fiend. They are appropriating the symbols of what the old world called evil and redefining them as the symbols of necessity.
Right.
By calling it the mark of the beast, they are mocking the old moralities. They're explicitly saying, your gods are dead, your superstitions are obsolete, there's only the administration. It's a profound power move. It forces the subject to wear their subjugation on their skin for all to see.
And then this mission. The Compression Sterilization Engine, the vernacular name for it, I can barely say it on air, but it's right there in the text.
Cunt crusher.
Cunt crusher. The brutality of the language, it matches the brutality of the device itself.
It's meant to shock. It's meant to dehumanize the process and the person.
We need to break this down. I want the listener to really visualize what this document is proposing. This isn't a pill. It's not a subtle surgery. It is a hydraulic press.
100 tons of force.
100 tons. The procedure is listed step by step in the manual. Ankle restraints, hydraulic restraints for precision alignment, and then activation. The whole process takes 0.4 seconds.
0.4 seconds.
Less than half a second. That is the blink of an eye. That's the time it takes for a single neuron to fire. And in that fraction of a second, the entire biological potential of human being it's crushed. Annihilated.
I want you to just focus on that time frame, 0.4 seconds.
It's insane.
Contrast that against the eons of evolutionary biology. It took millions of years for the human reproductive system to evolve into this complex, miraculous vessel of life.
And it takes less than half a second
for a hydraulic press to obliterate it. This is the triumph of steel over flesh. It's the ultimate final statement of the Brotherhood's philosophy. Biology is slow, messy, and weak. The machine is fast, precise, and absolute.
And the selling point, right there in the text: zero waste, zero error, zero recovery time.
Efficiency.
Efficiency as horror.
It's the capitalist dream realized in a nightmare scenario. It is absolute terrifying efficiency. There's no recovery time because there's nothing left to recover. The function has been deleted.
You're just hollowed out.
You are hollowed out by the state. You are left as a worker, a consumer, a breather of air, but you are no longer a creator of life. You've been stripped of your unauthorized potential to create.
And this brings us to the justification. Because no one does this. No one builds a 100-ton sterilization press without a reason.
A rationale.
They claim this is all about preparing for the second coming.
But not the one that the faithful were expecting, I imagine.
Not even close. Belléglise claims the real second coming isn't a savior, it's population catastrophe.
I see.
The collapse of food systems, water wars. He uses the phrase the cannibalization of the global south by the consuming north.
So he's using the fear of the apocalypse to justify the creation of hell on earth.
But I have to play the devil's advocate here for a moment. Or maybe the fiend's advocate.
Go on.
The threats he lists: resource collapse, climate change, water wars. These are real fears. These are things scientists have been warning us about for decades.
They are. The premise is correct.
So the Brotherhood is just saying we are the only ones with the courage to do what is necessary to stop it.
And that is the trap, isn't it?
Yeah.
The premise is absolutely correct. The planet is in danger. The population is unsustainable under our current models of consumption. But the conclusion they draw from that premise, that is the madness.
To destroy the species, to save the species.
They are arguing that to save the species, we must first destroy the humanity of the species.
Is survival valid if it requires us to become this? That's the question I keep coming back about. If the only way to survive is to turn the sky black and crush the wombs of half the population in a hydraulic press, are we actually surviving? Or have we just become a very efficient, very sterile colony of ants?
The Brotherhood would say that your question is a luxury.
A luxury of the dying.
Exactly. They would say, and this is a quote, "The worms of unchecked reproduction dry out in the sun of rational administration."
The worms.
They view basic human instinct, the desire to breed, to love, to be free, as worms, as parasites that are killing the host organism, which is the state.
It's the hard choice. That's how they frame it. They claim democracies were too weak to make this hard choice.
And in a chilling way, they commenting on the 97% again. The democracies were weak. They were weak because they were paralyzed by indecision, because they tried to balance freedom with survival.
And the Brotherhood just chooses survival.
They represent the final logic.
Yeah.
When logic is stripped of all empathy, this is where it arrives. It arrives at the press. They didn't use prayer or hope. They used a mechanism. They've applied the concept of managed obsolescence to human biology.
Managed obsolescence. We use that term for what? iPhones, cars.
Right. Things that are designed to break down so you have to buy a new one.
Here, they're designing the human race itself to break down.
To stop. To stop expanding. To become a static object. A closed loop. The Belléglise proposition is a blueprint for a world that no longer changes.
A world where history ends.
Yes. History ends because there are no new generations to write it. There is only the existing population living out their days productive, fed, housed, and sterile.
It sounds like a zoo.
It is a zoo, a perfectly managed, perfectly sustainable zoo run by the inmates who seized control of the keys and decided to lock the gates permanently from the inside.
So where does this leave us? We've looked at the silence, the 97% who stayed home.
Right.
We've looked at the fiend, the architect of this nightmare. We've looked at this a horrifying solution they are now implementing. This isn't just a policy paper anymore.
No.
This is a reality that is unfolding right now as we speak.
The gears have been set into place. That's how the document ends. The final stages are nudged into motion. It's happening.
And it makes me think about that number again, 97%, the people who didn't vote, the people who thought, it's just another election, it doesn't matter who wins.
They thought this system was a thermostat on the wall they could just ignore.
Right.
They didn't realize it was a life support machine. And by walking away from the controls, they allowed a new engineer to come in and, well, switch it to a very different setting.
The Belléglise proposition describes itself not as a horror, but as a solution.
And from their purely logical arithmetic perspective, it is. It's a completed gear system. It works.
And that's maybe the most terrifying part of all. It will work. The mathematics of it are sound.
Yeah.
If you sterilize the population, resource consumption will drop. If you seed the atmosphere with ash, the global temperature will drop. The logic holds.
The price is just everything else.
The price is the human soul.
If you believe in such a thing. The Brotherhood clearly does not. To them, the soul is just another random variable that causes inefficiency in the system.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought. We started this deep dive asking about the silence of the ballot box.
The silence that allowed the steel to rise.
If you're listening to this statistically, you're probably part of that silent 97%. You are part of the silence. You stayed home. You watched Netflix. You let the glitch happen.
You let the void open up.
So the question you have to ask yourself is this. Are you the victim of the machine? Are you the poor, oppressed citizen about to be processed? Or are you the mechanic who simply forgot to turn it off? Did you build the press with your inaction? Did you sanction it with your silence?
The machine does not care if you voted. The machine does not care about your regret now. It only cares that you fit within the restraints. The press activates in 0.4 seconds. That is the timeline of this new era, 0.4 seconds.
The sky is turning black, not with rain, but with ash. The press is warming up. The fiend is in office. You have the time that you have left. What will you do with it?
The TikTok.
This has been the deep dive. We'll see you. Well, we'll see you on the other side.
Or we won't.
Good luck. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine a sensation. You've just landed at McDonald-Cartier International Airport. It is Ottawa. It is the dead of February.
Right.
You step out of the terminal, bracing yourself for that dry, biting Canadian cold that freezes the inside of your nose. You look up at the sky, expecting snow, because it's Canada, it's winter.
Of course.
But what hits your face isn't snow. It's heavier, it's gray, it's granular, and it doesn't melt when it hits your skin. It smears, it leaves a streak of grease.
The locals have a name for it. They call it February flower.
Quaint name, almost.
Totally.
Domestic. Very Canadian, very safe. But we are not here today to talk about the weather, are we?
No, we are not.
We are doing a deep dive into the beast in the room, inside the Belléglise doctrine, a text that, and I have to be honest, terrified me. Not because of what it said, but because of how calm it sounded. Because that flower isn't weather, and I want you to tell me specifically what that substance is. Do not use metaphors. What is the physical composition of the air in Ottawa?
It is ash, but we have to be extremely precise about what kind of ash. This is not wood smoke. This is not the byproduct of a forest fire or anything natural.
Okay.
The source material describes a particulate haze that has been falling for 3 weeks straight. The meteorologists, the ones who are still employed and on the state payroll, are calling it an anomalous atmospheric condition.
Which is a lie.
It's a lie of omission, or rather, it's language being used to deliberately obscure a horrifying reality.
Obscure what reality? What is burning?
The ash is the result of the furnaces. It's the exhaust from the compression sterilization engines running 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week.
So we're talking about the industrial incineration of biological matter. So when you look at this February flower, what you are looking at is the residue of the Belléglise doctrine. This isn't pollution, you see. It is the physical manifestation of a society that has begun to consume itself. The system is literally raining down its byproducts on the citizens it claims to serve. Hold on, you used a phrase there, consume itself. That sounds poetic, and I understand the impulse, but I want to interrogate the mechanics of that. You're calling this an ontological error. To the layman, to someone on the street in Ottawa, that gray stuff is just smog. Why do you elevate it to philosophy? Why is this distinct from, say, living next to a coal plant in 19th century Manchester?
Because the pollution from a coal plant is a byproduct of production. You burn coal to make steel, to build bridges, to create something. That is a trade-off. A terrible one, maybe, but it's a trade-off.
Right, there's a goal, an end product.
An end product, exactly. But what is happening in Ottawa isn't production. It is reduction. That ash is the result of a process designed specifically to delete the future. The Belléglise doctrine argues that the most efficient way to organize a population is to remove biological variables. The system isn't making cars. It's not building homes. It's unmaking people.
So the product is the absence of product.
The product is zero. A perfect, clean, rational zero. And that is why the ash is so metaphysically disturbing. It is the tangible evidence of nothingness being manufactured on an industrial scale.
Let's ground this for a moment. We aren't just dealing with an abstract system. The source material presents a conflict that seems almost, well, too grotesque to be real, yet it's presented with the dry precision of a legal brief.
It reads like an engineer's report.
It does. We have a war here. On the north side of the border, we have the Republican Brotherhood for a new era in Canada. On the south side, we have the United States.
Or, to be precise, the first pro-natalist nation under the second Trump administration.
A collision between a state that mandates the end of birth and a state that mandates the enforcement of it. It's perfectly symmetrical in its horror.
It's a war between administrative solutions and biological imperatives. But here is the glitch, you see. Here's the part of the source that he does. It just makes no sense to the rational mind. How did this happen?
Exactly. How does a modern G7 nation like Canada wake up one morning and decide to turn itself into an abattoir? It wasn't a violent coup. There were no tanks in the streets, at least.
Yeah?
Not at first.
No. The mechanism was far more insidious.
The source gives us a number, 97%.
97% abstention.
Pause on that. Let that sink in. 97% of the electorate simply didn't show up.
They stayed home.
Yeah.
It was an election of silence. And this is absolutely crucial to understanding the horror we are about to unpack. The populace didn't vote for the Belléglise doctrine.
No.
They simply ceased to care enough to vote against it.
Yeah.
They created a vacuum, a void of political will. And the universe, as we know, a war is a vacuum.
So the monster didn't break down the door?
The door was left wide open.
The monster just walked in.
Worse, the monster walked in because the house was empty. The people were physically there, but politically, spiritually, they had already ceased to exist. They were asleep. And when you sleep through history, you wake up inside a machine. You wake up in a world where democracy has been replaced by administration.
Which brings us to the administrator himself, Mike Belléglise. If I were a screenwriter pitching this story to Hollywood and I told the producers we have a regime that forcibly sterilizes its female population to achieve demographic sustainability, they would tell me to write a villain.
Of course.
A charismatic demagogue, a guy with a scar, maybe a leather trench coat, someone shouting from a balcony with fire in their eyes. But look at the evidence. Look at the photographs provided in the source. Describe Mike Belléglise to me.
He looks like an insurance salesman from Winnipeg.
Is that a metaphor?
No, that's literally what he was. An actuary, then a regional manager for a large insurance firm.
An insurance salesman.
He's described as 53 years old, soft around the middle. He wears a suit that the author explicitly notes looks like it was bought in bulk. His face, and this is a direct quote, is described as being designed for expressing mild disappointment.
I struggle with this. I really do. It feels anticlimactic. Are we really supposed to believe that this guy, a man who looks like he's about to deny my dental claim, is the face of the apocalypse? Is the author trying too hard to be ironic here?
I don't think it's irony. I think it's a warning. This is the banality of evil updated for the algorithmic age. Hannah Arendt warned us about Eichmann, the bureaucrat and the Nazi machine, but Belléglise is an evolution of that.
How so?
Eichmann was still, on some level, serving an ideology of hate. Belléglise isn't a tyrant in the Byronic sense. He isn't driven by hate. He isn't driven by sadism or glory or even power in the way we traditionally understand it. He is a functionary. He is the ultimate system manager.
He doesn't hate you.
He doesn't hate you. He just wants to file you correctly. To him, you are a data point, a potential liability on a planetary balance sheet.
And the source says he refuses to live in the Prime Minister's residence at 24 Sussex Drive.
He calls it a monument to reproductive excess.
A staggering phrase. Reproductive excess. So where does he work?
He works out of the Langevin block, the old Privy Council office. And the first thing he did was strip the walls of all the portraits of former prime ministers. He replaced them with flowcharts.
Flowcharts.
Yes, organizational diagrams.
Yeah.
He is obsessed with the numbers. And the numbers, when you read them, are terrifying. He claims to have shifted the national birth rate from 1.4, which is, already below replacement level, to 0.0 in the administered zones.
And he boasts about this. There's that quote.
We have solved the climate problem through the simple expedient of removing the future. He says it with no malice. He says it like an engineer who has finally fixed a persistent bug in the code.
So the question then becomes, is this madness? Or is this just extreme rationality? Where do you draw the line?
It's the logical conclusion of utilitarianism stripped of all humanity. If you view human beings solely as carbon emitters, as consumers of resources, as burdens on the electrical grid, then the most rational, most utilitarian thing you could do for the planet is to remove them.
He's not insane.
He's hyper-sane. He views humanity as a demographic surplus. We are inventory. And when you have too much inventory in a warehouse, what do you get?
Stop ordering more. You liquidate.
You liquidate. You clear the shelves. He tells the interviewer, in a line that has stayed with me, we have replaced morality with engineering. That is the core of the glitch. He genuinely believes morality is an obsolete technology. It causes friction. It slows down the optimization of the state.
And he even has an architectural model for this. He's remodeling Parish 7 based on Detroit.
Yes. He says Detroit achieved demographic collapse organically. He wants to replicate the decay of an American city, but do it on purpose, with administrative precision. He calls it making it humane.
A perversion of language?
It's a complete inversion. To Belléglise, humane means efficient. He looks at the chaos of human life, the messiness of raising children, the noise, the joy, the unpredictability, and he sees an error code. He sees waste.
A system that needs to be debugged.
Exactly. By turning the country into an organized, administered version of Detroit, by emptying it out, he believes he is cleaning up the mess. He views humanity not as a species to be preserved, but as a stain to be scrubbed out.
Okay, let's move into the mechanism of that scrubbing. We have to go into the room. We can't stay in the philosophical abstract because the Belléglise doctrine isn't just paper, it's steel.
It is.
The source takes us to Parish 12, formerly the town of Renfrew, Ontario. This is where the abstraction of demographic collapse becomes the concrete reality of industrial processing. Describe the setting for me.
The transformation of space is what's so jarring. Parish 12 isn't some purpose-built camp in the wilderness. It's a town. They've taken Victorian storefronts, places that used to be bakeries or hardware stores, and they've converted them into processing centers. The architecture of a functioning community is still there, but it's been hollowed out, repurposed.
And the
The most immediate change is the erasure of identity. The women aren't women anymore, they are subjects.
Specifically, they are numbers. The source focuses on one.
Subject 4471A. This is a classic technique of dehumanization, of course. We've seen it throughout history.
Right.
But the Brotherhood has added a 21st century technological layer.
The mark.
The mark. A series of lines tattooed on the back of the hand that encodes their entire biological history and, horrifyingly, a projected obsolescence date. It's the barcode of the human commodity.
Why? Why abolish names?
The official reason given is that they found them emotionally complicating.
Emotionally complicating, again with the language of administration.
Think about that phrasing. Emotions are friction. Friction reduces efficiency. Therefore, names must go. It's the logic of the machine.
And then there's the machine itself. The source gives us two names for it, and the contrast is stark.
It is?
The official name, the Compression Sterilization Engine, or CSE, and the slang used by the guards and the subject.
Let's cunt frusher.
It's a brutal, ugly word.
It's meant to be ugly. It reflects the violence of the act. The official name sanitizes it, turns it into a piece of industrial equipment. The slang tells you what it actually does. It reclaims the horror.
But we need to confront the mechanics. The source interviews a man identified only as the engineer in Parish 9, and what struck me wasn't just the description of the machine, but the tone of the man describing it. He sounds proud.
He has the pride of a craftsman. That's the banality again. He's proud of the improvements he's made. He talks about moving from an early suspension model, where the subjects were held upside down like in a slaughterhouse, to a new recumbent model because it is, and I quote, more dignified.
Dignified. They are crushing human pelvises with industrial machinery, and they're worried about dignity. The contradiction is staggering.
But it's not a contradiction to him. That is the administrative mindset. We must be humane while we destroy you. But look at the technical specifications he gives.
100 tons of hydraulic force.
100 tons. Instantaneous pelvic trauma. It is designed not just to break, but to crush the pelvic cavity so severely that the body goes into shock. It physically reshapes the skeletal structure to make carrying a child an anatomical impossibility.
But here's the detail. Here's the detail that doesn't fit the efficiency narrative, and I want you to explain it to me. The engineer mentions secondary procedures.
Yes.
The removal of the ovaries, an oophorectomy. When I read that, I stopped. I asked myself, why? If the pelvis is crushed with 100 tons of force, reproduction is already physically impossible. The primary goal is achieved. Why the extra surgery? Why the extra trauma? Why spend the medical resources on this secondary step?
And the engineer gives you the answer. And it is the key, I think, to understanding the entire regime. It's not in the main text of his interview, it's in a footnote. He says, hormones cause emotion. Emotion causes inefficiency.
So they're not just sterilizing them.
They don't just want sterile women, you see. They want a stable workforce. They have discovered, through trial and error, that women in their 30s, post-sterilization and without the natural fluctuations of their hormonal cycles, make excellent machinists.
My God, so they are stripping away the biological capacity for feeling to create a better biological robot.
Precisely. This is the commodification of the human body in its most absolute, most terrifying form. They weren't just taking the future by preventing birth. They're taking the present. They are taking the internal life of the subject and flattening it out for the sake of productivity.
Which brings us to subject 4471A. The interviewer meets her. She's 42 years old, a former journalist from Toronto, and she laughs. The source says it's a laugh that doesn't match her eyes. She shows the interviewer her scars. She talks about the machine as if it's just a Tuesday.
That dissociation is a survival mechanism. It has to be. But you have to listen to what she actually says about freedom. She says, I feel administered.
Administered, not oppressed, not tortured, administered.
Yes. She eats, she sleeps, she works, she doesn't bleed. She even acknowledges the efficiency of it all. This is the seductive nature of the void. She goes so far as to suggest that maybe, just maybe, they are saving the world. Maybe this is what salvation looks like, she says.
She's rationalizing her own destruction. She has to survive.
She is trying to find meaning in a vacuum of meaning, but then the glitch surfaces, the human element that the machine can't quite erase. She grabs the interviewer's arm and asks the one question that breaks the entire logic of the system.
What happens when we run out of women?
Exactly. It's the fundamental paradox of the suicide cult. You can only sustain it as long as you have people to consume. Once the last woman is pressed, the machine spins on empty. The project consumes its own fuel source.
And she sees that.
Subject 4471A is living in that glitch of the human condition. She has been hollowed out, made into a resource, And yet she still possesses the capacity to see the end of the timeline. She knows that this efficiency is a flat line. It's a dead signal.
So we have the horror of the Canadian administrative state. The natural human instinct, then, is to look for a hero. We look across the border to the United States. If Canada is the darkness, surely America must be the light.
But the source material doesn't give us heroes, does it?
No, it gives us the imperial womb.
It gives us the perfect mirror image. If Canada is the negation of life, the American response is the weaponization of life. The Trump administration, in its second term, has declared itself the first pro-natalist nation. We have a Department of Fertility. We have the criminalization of contraception. We have Secretary Kellyanne Conway on television calling the Canadian policy spiritual warfare.
But you have to be very clear about this. The American response is not about freedom.
It is about ownership. It is about control.
And the conflict starts with the ferry incident. And this, to me, is the narrative and philosophical turning point of the entire source. A ferry leaves Port Huron, Michigan. On board are 400 American women. They are fleeing the United States.
But they are not fleeing to freedom in the way we'd imagine. They are fleeing for sterilization.
They are running toward the cunt crusher.
Yes.
Let that sink in for a moment. They are trying to escape the United States to get to the Canadian machines. That is a profound indictment of the American situation, that women would run toward a 100-ton hydraulic press to escape something called the Department of Fertility.
It completely destabilizes the simple narrative of rescue. It shows that both systems are producing refugees. And how does the U.S. respond? Do they send negotiators? Do they send counselors to ask these women why they're fleeing?
No, they send the Coast Guard. They intercept the ferry in the middle of the St. Clair River. And Trump posts on Truth Social, the quote is in the book, "Canada is killing American babies."
He doesn't say women, note that. He says babies. The women are merely the vessels. They are shipping containers for a national resource, and those containers have been stolen by a rival corporation.
And then comes the drone strike on Windsor.
To liberate the processing facility there.
The Americans claim they were saving the women inside, but the satellite imagery included in the source shows they just bombed the building. 200 administrative subjects killed in the strike.
It is the logic of, we had to destroy the village to save it, applied directly to the uterus. If they can't control the means of reproduction, they will destroy the capacity for it entirely, rather than let the enemy claim it. It's scorched earth policy on a biological level.
And this brings us to General Samuel Vickers, the American commander on the ground. He operates what they call the liberated zone in southern Ontario. He's described as having the stillness of someone who has seen too much.
A very telling description.
And he claims to be fighting for the responsibility to procreate. Unpack that doctrine for me. What does that mean?
It's a terrifying inversion of rights language. A responsibility to procreate implies that your body is not your own. It is a state asset. If you are of childbearing age and not using your body to produce citizens, you are negligent. You are, in effect, hoarding a national resource.
He seems to believe he's the good guy. He points to the birth rate in his Zone 2.1 perfect replacement level as proof of his victory. The women here are having babies, he says. They're happy.
Of course he believes it. Every monster does.
But when the interviewer presses him, what about the women who don't want to be there? What about the ones who sought sterilization voluntarily? He shuts it down. He says, and this is another direct quote, "There are no voluntary sterilizations, only ideological contamination."
And that is the trap. That is the philosophical checkmate. To Vickers, the desire not to reproduce is in itself proof of insanity. It is proof that you have been brainwashed by the Canadian enemy. Therefore, your consent is irrelevant. He is not oppressing you. He is deprogramming you for your own good.
So the Brotherhood forces the womb closed with a hydraulic press.
And the Americans force the wound open with legislation and soldiers.
Both sides view the female body as territory.
As state territory. To be conquered, to be administered, to be optimized according to a state-mandated goal. There is no individual left in this equation. There is only the state and its biological machinery.
And caught between these two leviathans, these two monstrous systems, we have Toronto, the neutral zone, the unadministered territory.
The glitch in the war map.
It feels like the only place where something resembling our current reality still exists, but the source makes it clear it's hanging by a thread.
It is. And Mayor Okonkwo is the tragic figure at the center of this. She is the exhausted moderate, the last sane person, trying to keep her city from being burned by one side or processed by the other. She is trying to find a middle ground between two absolutes.
But what does that middle ground actually look like? The source is very specific. It isn't freedom.
No, it's the soft press.
Voluntary barbarism, she calls it. The Toronto facility offers a sterilization procedure using only 40 tons of force, and it leaves the ovaries intact. It's presented almost as a luxury, a spa treatment compared to the industrial crushers in the parishes.
The boutique form of mutilation.
But is voluntary sterilization in a war zone ever actually a choice? Can it be?
That is the core philosophical question of that section. I would argue no. If your only options are be crushed into dust by the state or be forcibly impregnated by invaders, is the choice to undergo a soft mutilation really an act of free will?
It's a coerced survival tactic.
Exactly. It's choosing the least terrible of three terrible options. And Mayor Okonkwo knows this. She admits the fatalism of her position. She has this line where she says, "The planet can't support us, but the species can't support stopping."
She is trapped in the paradox. She sees the logic on both sides.
She sees that both monsters are, in their own twisted way, right. The math of climate change and resource scarcity supports Belléglise. The biological, evolutionary drive supports Vickers. The moderate position is simply to be crushed more slowly, more gently. She calls her job trying to find a compromise between the machine and the prayer. But in a war of absolutes, the moderate is always the first casualty.
Eventually, though, you have to leave the neutral zone. You have to go to the front lines. And that's where the source introduces us to Colonel Sarah Chen.
The soldier of the void.
She is voluntarily sterilized. She says, and it's a chilling line, "I am pure administration." She leads a unit called the Remnants, women from the parishes who now fight for the Brotherhood. And this is the part that I found most difficult psychologically to wrap my head around. Why would these women, who have been mutilated by the Brotherhood's machines, fight for the Brotherhood? Why defend the system that crushed you?
Because they are more terrified of the alternative. The source gives us a specific case study. R447, a former elementary school teacher from Hamilton. She states her reasoning very clearly. She fights because she refuses to go back to the American pro-natalist regime. She says, they're fighting for the past. We're fighting for the absence of the future.
The absence of the future. Say more about that. What does that mean?
It is the ultimate nihilistic existential stance. It is a complete rejection of hope, which she sees as a reproductive emotion.
A reproductive emotion?
Think about it. If you have children, or if you plan to, you have to care about what happens in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You have to worry about the climate, the economy, the war, the state of the world. But if you are sterile, if you are pure administration, if your timeline ends with your own death, then you only have to care about now. You only have to care about winning the next 10 minutes.
So R447 isn't fighting for a flag or for Belléglise.
She is fighting for the right to be nothing, to be a biological dead end. The machine took her future. The Americans want to force a future upon her that she does not want. So she chooses the void. She chooses to become the weapon that ensures no one else gets the future they want either. It is spite raised to the level of metaphysics.
Is that bravery or is that total psychological collapse?
It's both. I think it has to be both.
Yeah.
It is the bravery of the person who has already died and have nothing left to lose.
As we move toward the end game of this deep dive, the source takes us back to Belléglise. He's in a command bunker deep beneath Ottawa, and we're told the ash, the February flower, has stopped falling. Why?
Because the furnaces have been repurposed. They are now processing the war dead. Belléglise, in his interview from the bunker, calls it efficiency. He is recycling the battlefield.
He has a final vision, a final project.
A self-sustaining, climate-controlled facility for 100,000 administered subjects.
And he defines peace not as happiness, not as prosperity, but as stasis.
Yes, stasis. He wants a world where the population is managed like the water level in a dam. No growth, no decline, just the machine running forever, maintaining equilibrium. This is the death of history. If nothing changes, if no new generations rise to challenge the old, time effectively stops. He wants to freeze humanity in a block of administrative amber.
And then, in the final pages, we get the contrast. The final image, a girl at the border, a young woman walking toward the American lines.
This is the transaction stripped of all romance, all ideology. She isn't running to freedom. She is running to a contract.
She agrees to have 3 children. In exchange, she gets housing, food, and American citizenship.
And look at her words. She says, I want to not be pressed. If that means babies, then babies.
Yeah.
It's so stark. So transactional. And then she adds, I choose. That's the thing. I choose.
But is it choice?
Is it? Or is she just selecting which administrative zone to occupy? She is trading her biological capacity for physical safety. The space between the machine and the womb, that space where we used to think human life happened, it's gone. It has vanished.
They're just assets.
There are just biological assets deciding who gets to exploit them. The girl is a reproductive unit entering a new inventory system. That she perceives this as choice, that is the final and perhaps the greatest tragedy in the entire text.
The source ends where it began, with an image of the ash. The February flower is now mixing with the cherry blossoms of spring. It's a beautiful, horrible image. And the writer concludes, the space where human beings used to live is smaller now. Soon it will be pressed flat.
And that, I think, is the beast in the room. It isn't the machine, it isn't the Cunt Crusher or General Vickers or even the war. The beast is the logic that made the machine necessary in the first place.
Explain that.
It's the idea that we are problems to be solved rather than lives to be lived. Once you accept the premise that humanity is a demographic problem that requires an administrative solution, the hydraulic press becomes inevitable. The press is just the tool, the logic. The logic is the killer.
So here's the question we have to leave you with today. It's the question the source forces you to confront, whether you want to or not. If you had to choose, and in this world you do have to choose between being administered, which means efficiency, stasis, the end of pain, but also the end of the future, or being responsible, which means forced creation, the chaos of birth, the imposition of a future you didn't ask for. Which circle of hell do you pick?
I think the most terrifying thing about the source material is that it suggests the question is irrelevant. The machine is already running. You can hear the gears grinding. Even now, in our world, the choice was made in that 97% abstention. The choice was silence. And now we're just waiting for the press to come down.
That's it for this deep dive into the Belléglise doctrine. Sleep well.
If you can. We do not recognize the authority of your ghosts. It's just 10 words. And, on the surface, it sounds like something from a bad action movie, maybe a cryptic political tweet.
Yeah.
But when you actually sit with the source material we're looking at today, the ontology of administration, sovereignty without the ghost, that sentence, it starts to feel less like rhetoric and a lot more like a threat. And I don't just mean a threat to your personal safety. I mean a threat to your entire reality. Because if we take Mike Belléglise and his Republican Brotherhood at their word, if we just assume for a moment they aren't speaking in metaphors, well, it just unravels the entire tapestry of Western civilization. It pulls the thread on human rights, on natural law, on the very idea that there is a good way to live versus a bad way.
You're framing it as a political manifesto. I think the text makes it pretty clear this is closer to an autopsy report.
An autopsy of what?
Of the modern soul. Of the West. Of anyone who still believes in things like rights and dignity. This text, it assumes the patient is already dead. We're just the last ones to notice the smell. What we're diving into today isn't just a political strategy. It's a concept the author calls administrative materialism. And I have to warn you, it is. It is cold. It's colder than anything we've discussed in previous deep dives. It strips the world of that, that warmth of meaning and leaves only the frigid calculation of matter.
Okay, then let's not dance around it. We need to understand precisely what they mean by ghosts. Because in that opening declaration, we do not recognize the authority of your ghosts. They're obviously not talking about poltergeists or bumps in the night. They're targeting something very specific.
Oh, absolutely. They're talking about the things you and I, well, probably all of us listening, rely on to make any sense of the world. Divine command, natural law, human rights, intergenerational justice. The Brotherhood looks at all these concepts that form the absolute bedrock of the United Nations, the U.S. Constitution, the Church, and they categorize them. They call them regulatory ideals without operational content.
Hold on. Regulatory ideals without operational content. That's dense. We have to break that down right now before we move an inch further. Yeah. What does that actually mean in practice?
Okay. Think of it this way. Imagine you're driving a car, and this car is mechanically capable of doing, say, 200 miles per hour. You're on a highway. And there's a metal sign by the road that says speed limit 55. Now, in a liberal democracy, or what we'd call a moral society, we assume that sign has authority. It's a regulatory ideal. It tells you what you ought to do. It appeals to your sense of citizenship, your fear of the law, your social compact with the state.
Right, and most of us slow down. We see the sign, we process the rule, and we adjust our behavior based on some kind of internal acceptance of that external authority.
You slow down because you believe in the authority of the sign or,
Right.
or the law behind it. But does that sign have operational content?
No.
No. The sign doesn't have a magnet that grabs your engine. It doesn't have a force field. It relies entirely on a ghost, the ghost of the law living inside your head. If you simply decide not to care, the sign is it's just paint on metal. It cannot physically stop the car. It is impotent.
So Belléglise is looking at the entire Western world, at our sacred duties and our inalienable rights, and he's saying they're all just speed limit signs.
Exactly. He's saying they have no mechanics. They cannot stop the car. And his project, or rather the project of the Brotherhood, is to stop pretending the sign works. They want to move politics from the art of the good life, which is how we've thought about it since, Aristotle, to the mechanics of population management.
That is a massive shift. That's moving from asking how should we live to asking how do we keep the gears turning. It transforms the citizen into a variable in an equation.
And to understand how they get there, we really have to try to see the world through Belléglise's eyes. The source text has a whole section on this, the phenomenology of ghosts. It demands that we explain what Belléglise actually sees when he looks at the world. Because he isn't, hallucinating. He's seeing an absence. He's looking at the altar and he's just seeing an empty table.
The text brings up the philosopher Charles Taylor here, and specifically his huge work, A Secular Age. Taylor talks about something called the immanent frame. I think we need to unpack that because it seems absolutely essential to the Brotherhood's worldview. It's a philosophical term, sure, but it describes a very visceral experience of reality.
It's the foundational brick. Taylor argues that in the pre-modern world, think the Middle Ages, the world was porous. The supernatural could just get in. You could be possessed by demons. You could be healed by grace. Meaning was literally everywhere. A storm wasn't just a low-pressure system. It was God's anger. A plague wasn't just a virus. It was a curse. The boundary between yourself and the world was permeable.
Okay, but we don't live there anymore. We don't diagnose the flu as a case of demon possession.
Right. We live inside the immanent frame. We've constructed what Taylor calls a buffered self. We understand the world as this closed system of cause and effect. Physics, chemistry, biology. There is no hole in the ceiling for God to reach through. However, and this is the crucial part where Belléglise inserts his knife liberalism, still clings to the language of that enchanted world. We talk about sacred rights. We talk about the dignity of the individual. We act as if there is some cosmic judge watching us, even though we've built a world that runs entirely on secular mechanics. We're atheists in practice who speak like theologians.
So the ghost is just the persistence of that old meaning in a new world that has no mechanism to actually support it. It's basically nostalgia.
It's worse than nostalgia. It's what the text calls double bookkeeping. This is the core accusation that Belléglise levels against all of liberal democracy. The text argues our current system keeps two separate sets of books. Book one is the normative superstructure. This is where we keep all our eloquent speeches about freedom, justice, the rights of the refugee, the sanctity of life. It's the curriculum we teach to our children. It's the preamble to our constitutions.
And book two?
Book two is the operational infrastructure, the markets, the bureaucracy, the security apparatus, the actual physical supply chains, the algorithms that trade stocks.
I see exactly where this is going. Book two is how the world actually runs. Book two is why the refugee stays in the camp, despite all the pretty speeches in book one. Book two is why the market sets the price of insulin regardless of a right to life. Book two is just the grim reality of logistics.
Precisely. And liberalism survives by keeping these two books separate. We let the operational infrastructure, the gears run the world, but we use the normative superstructure, the ghosts, to make ourselves feel good about it. We bomb a country for geostrategic reasons, that's book two, but we tell ourselves we're spreading democracy, and that's book one. Belléglise's innovation is simply to burn book one.
There is no superstructure. There are only gears. That's the quote. He's collapsing the distinction entirely.
It's a terrifying kind of honesty. He looks at the liberal politician and says, stop pretending you care about rights when your budget effectively prices a human life at a very specific dollar amount. Let's just publish the price list. He is calling the bluff of the entire Enlightenment project. He's saying that if you cannot physically enforce a right, it doesn't exist. It's a phantom.
It removes the buffer. It forces us to just stare directly at the machinery. But this isn't just about accounting, is it? This leads us straight into the second part of the analysis, which the source calls the death of the decision. Now, the text draws a very heavy comparison here between Belléglise and Carl Schmitt. And for anyone listening who hasn't spent their nights reading German legal theory from the 1920s, we probably need to set the stage.
The bad boy of political philosophy.
That is putting it mildly.
Yeah.
Schmidt was, he was the jurist of the Third Reich. He was the legal mind who justified Hitler's rise to power. But his analysis of sovereignty it's inescapable if you study political science. You can hate him, but you have to grapple with him. Schmidt's core thesis is what he called political theology. He argued that all modern concepts of the state are just secularized theological concepts.
Right. For Schmidt, the sovereign is just a secular word for God. The state of exception, that moment where the law is suspended during a crisis, is just a secular word for a miracle. Schmidt looked at the modern state and saw a displaced church. And he thought liberalism was weak because it tried to hide the decision maker. It wanted endless debate in parliament. It wanted to defer the choice to committees and procedures. Schmidt said no. Someone must decide. He wanted to restore the sovereign decision to save the state. He wanted a man who could just cut through the knot.
So Schmidt thought we were just painting over religion with political terms. God decides, so the sovereign must decide. The essence of politics, for him, was the will, the act of will. But the text argues that Belléglise is doing something completely different. He isn't trying to be a new God king. He isn't trying to be the Führer in the Schmittian sense.
And this is the critical divergence. This is where people so often misunderstand the Brotherhood. They see the authoritarianism and they immediately assume it's just fascism 2.0. But Schmidt wanted to restore the decision, Belléglise. Belléglise wants to eliminate the decision entirely.
Eliminate it. How do you govern without making decisions? Governance is decision-making. That's what it is.
Not in the ontology of administration. You govern by turning everything into a calculation. Think about it. The ghosts, ethics, theology, morality, those are the things that require human judgment. They require a human being to stand up vulnerable and say, I believe this is right. That is a decision. It's a moment of interpretation. It implies a choice between good and evil. Belléglise wants to replace the question, should we, with the question, can we?
Let's use the examples from the text because they really drive this home. They take these incredibly intimate human questions and just strip them bare. The old question, the theological one, is, should we have children? And that implies a value judgment. Is it good? Is it bad? Does God want it? Do I want it?
And Belléglise replaces it with, what is the carrying capacity of the ecosystem? That is not a moral question. That's a math problem. There's no decision to be made there, not in the human sense. The numbers simply are. If the capacity is X and the current population is Y and Y is greater than X, the operation executes. The result acts upon the population without anyone ever having to say, I desire this.
Here's the other one from the source. What does God command? Becomes, what is the tensile strength of the pelvic press?
It's chilling. The authority shifts from the invisible, from God, to the absolutely undeniable to material limits. You can argue with God. You can reinterpret Scripture. You can have a reformation. You can claim you had a personal revelation. You cannot argue with the tensile strength of steel. If the machine presses with 100 tons of force, the result is not a matter of debate. It's a matter of physics. It closes the space for politics entirely.
This is the end of legitimation. That's what the source calls it. Belléglise doesn't need to legitimize his rule by saying God chose me or the people voted for me. He legitimizes it by saying the math checks out. Ethics becomes engineering, politics becomes logistics.
Yeah.
And the leader, well, the leader becomes a systems administrator. You don't ask your IT guy if he morally approves of the latest server update. You just ask if the system is stable. You ask if the bugs have been patched. Belléglise frames the entire human population as the server architecture that is overheating.
But this system isn't just running servers, it's running on human bodies. And this brings us to the most brutal, just unavoidable part of this source material. We have to talk about the machine. Part 3 of our analysis, the ontology of the machine. The text calls it the Compression Sterilization Engine, or the CSE.
Or, in the vernacular of the administered population, the cunt crusher.
I want us to look at this thing, and I want to be careful here. It is so easy to treat this as just body horror, to get grossed out and then look away. But the text demands we look at it as a philosophical object. It gives us the specs. 100 tons of force. 0.4 seconds of operation, 100% efficacy. What is this thing ontologically? What is its nature? It is pure function. When we look at the CSE, we are looking at the physical embodiment of administrative materialism. In any other regime, sterilization is a medical procedure or a punishment or maybe a tragedy. It carries weight. It has meaning. The CSE strips all of that meaning away. It's an industrial press. It is a factory component.
The text compares it to a blast furnace. That image. That one stuck with me.
Yes, and that analogy is absolutely vital. Think about a blast furnace converting iron ore into steel. The furnace does not hate the iron. The furnace does not love the steel. It doesn't judge the ore for being impure. It simply processes material. It applies heat and pressure to change state A into state B. The CSE treats the female reproductive system in exactly the same way. It transforms the body from a site of meaning, where life is created, where love might happen, where the future is born, into a site of processing.
It's the neutrality that makes it so nauseating. If they were doing this out of some kind of pure hatred, if it were a punishment for sin or an ethnic cleansing driven by rage, it would almost be easier to understand. Hatred is human. Hatred is a ghost. But this is just efficiency. It's the banality of evil raised to an industrial standard.
And that is why the ghosts have no authority here. If you scream, "My body is sacred," at the machine does not care. Not because it's evil, but because sacredness is not a variable in its programming. It only knows pressure, time, and resistance. It is functionally deaf to the plea of the human.
The text brings in Michel Foucault here, specifically his concept of biopower. Now, Foucault is a staple in these discussions. Usually, when we talk about biopower, we mean the state trying to optimize life, make people healthier, live longer, track their births, vaccinate them. The goal is to make the population productive, to make life grow. The Brotherhood seems to be doing the exact opposite. They are manufacturing barrenness on an industrial scale.
It looks like an inversion, but the text argues it's actually an intensification. Foucault said biopower exerts a positive influence on life, subjecting it to precise controls. The Brotherhood is still administering. They're still optimizing. But they're optimizing for closure. They're optimizing for the end of the line.
Closure?
Think about the kind of bureaucracy Foucault describes. To control a population, you need to know them. You need censuses, medical records, endless files on every citizen's psychology and history. That's hermeneutics, the science of interpretation. You have to read the subject, you have to understand them to manipulate them. The CSE requires no knowledge. It requires no history. The text mentions the mark on the hand.
The barcode.
Yes, but notice the distinction the author makes. In a fascist regime, a tattoo on the arm is a mark of shame or identification. It marks you as other. It carries a message. This person is lesser. Here, the text calls it a routing instruction. It's not about who you are, it's about where you go in the queue. Subject 44701A is not a case study. She isn't a person with a medical history that needs to be analyzed. She is a node in a network.
Scheduled for projected obsolescence. That phrase just stuck with me. It sounds like something you'd find in a warranty manual for a toaster, not a description of a human being.
That is biopower without biology. It treats the human herd exactly like a server farm. You manage heat, you manage capacity, and when a unit is no longer efficient, you decommission it. The individual story, the hopes, the dreams, the trauma, that's all just noise. The system filters it out.
Which has to lead us to the motivation. Why? Why decommission the future? Why optimize for extinction? Part 4 of our outline is the war on futurity. The text introduces the non-identity problem from the philosopher Derek Parfit. We need to explain this because it's a tricky bit of philosophy, but Belléglise seems to weaponize it.
It is tricky, but it's fascinating. Derek Parfit was a British philosopher who posed this puzzle about future generations. The basic premise is this. If you prevent a child from being born, have you actually harmed that child? Parfit argues no, because there is no child to be harmed. Non-existence cannot suffer. You cannot violate the rights of someone who never, ever exists.
Usually people use this to argue about environmental ethics in this really confusing way, like it's hard to say we owe the future anything because the people of the future don't exist yet. It's usually a trap that philosophers get themselves stuck in. But Belléglise, he seems to turn this into a weapon.
Belléglise takes it to its logical extreme. If the unborn cannot be harmed, then the future has no moral claim on us whatsoever. He argues that the very idea of the future is just another ghost. It's a projection of our own anxiety onto an empty horizon. We sacrifice our present comfort for the children, but the children are hypothetical. The carbon count in the atmosphere is real. The resource depletion is real. The future is a fantasy. The present is a crisis.
And this is where the text gets into what he calls operational eschatology. Eschatology being the theology of the end times, how the world is supposed to end. The Brotherhood, it seems, has its own end times mythos.
They've hijacked the religious structure completely. They talk about the second coming, but in their doctrine, the second coming isn't Jesus returning on a cloud to judge the living and the dead. The second coming is ecological collapse. It's the climate catastrophe. It's the moment the biosphere finally snaps.
The apocalypse is real, but it's material. It's not Judgment Day, it's just Reckoning Day.
And if the apocalypse is material, then salvation must be mechanical. The savior isn't a messiah. The savior is the machine, the CSE. By preventing births, the machine lowers the carbon footprint, it reduces the strain on the ecosystem, and it saves the species from the second coming. It pulls the emergency brake on the train of history.
It's a salvation that looks an awful lot like extinction, or at the very least, a radical shrinking of the population.
But look at how the text describes the infant's ashes darkening the sky. The sky blackens not with meaning, but with carbon capture. Most people see that smoke, and they think of death, of tragedy. Belléglise sees quantitative success. He sees the ledger finally balancing.
Efficiency over morality, traditional anti-natalist philosophers like David Benatar, they argue that life is suffering. They say we shouldn't have kids out of a sense of compassion because the world is just too cruel. Belléglise doesn't seem to care about suffering at all.
No, not in the slightest. He argues existence is inefficient, and that is a massive difference. Benatar says, don't have kids because they will be sad. Belléglise says, don't have kids because the system cannot support the load. One is a moral plea, the other is an operational constraint. One is founded on a kind of empathy, the other is founded on engineering.
And the end result is this vision of darkness. Day turns to night, so the species may survive. But survive as what? As just data points in a system.
Quantitative existence rather than qualitative flourishing. That's the trade. We give up the good life, art, joy, family, the future, in exchange for the bare biological fact that the substrate continues to exist. We survive as a biological slurry, but we cease to exist as a civilization.
Which brings us to the subjects of this regime. Part 5. Sovereignty without the sovereign. The text invokes the philosopher Giorgio Agamben and his concept of homo saucer.
The sacred man. Yes. In ancient Roman law, this was a figure who could be killed by anyone without it being considered murder, but who could not be sacrificed in a religious ritual. He was outside the law, so he had no rights, and outside the divine, so he had no ritual value. He was just bare life. Agamben used this concept to explain the concentration camp inmate in the 20th century.
So are the women being processed in the parish's homo saucer?
The text says yes, but it corrects Agamben's application. Agamben's theory relies on the exception. The sovereign decides to suspend the law to create the camp. The camp is a space where the law is paused, but as we've already established, Belléglise doesn't do decisions, and he doesn't do exceptions.
Right. In the Brotherhood's parishes, the law isn't suspended. It's just irrelevant.
Exactly. Power operates through procedures, not through laws. If you're processed by the CSE, your rights aren't being violated because rights are not a recognized data format. It's like trying to feed a VHS tape into a USB slot. It's not an error. It's an incompatibility. You aren't banned from the law. You're just invisible to it.
And presiding over this entire procedure is the figure they call the pious pope. I found this title fascinatingly ironic. It conjures images of white smoke and balconies and tradition.
It's the ultimate irony. The pious pope in this system is an administrator. He's described not as making decrees, but as nudging into motion. The language used is straight out of machine learning. Gradient descent, optimization.
Nudged into motion. That's so passive.
Yeah.
It lacks the thunder of sovereignty, the I have decided.
It diffuses all responsibility. If a king orders an execution, the king is responsible. If an administrator optimizes the gradient and the result is mass sterilization, well, who's to blame? The algorithm, the math. The Pope is just reading the output. He washes his hands not in water, but in data.
The population is no longer a people, not a political entity that can revolt or make demands. They are a data set.
Discrete units. And the prevention of Grace birth, which is the explicit theological crime being prevented here, is treated by this pious pope as merely suppressing a bug. Christ represents the ultimate disruption, the ultimate ghost trying to enter the machine. The system must prevent the anomaly. If Christ means the interruption of history by the divine, the CSE is the firewall that blocks the connection.
Let's pivot to the opposition, because Belléglise isn't operating in a vacuum. He has a foil. Part 6, the American foil. The text sets up this major clash between the Brotherhood and the Trump administration, who are representing the American pronatalists.
This is the clash of theologies. On one side, you have the Brotherhood's cold administrative materialism, and on the other, you have the American responsibility to procreate. And the text characterizes the American position as explicitly heavily theological.
Spiritual warfare, sacred trust, freedom, it's all the greatest hits. It's the rhetoric of a revival tent.
The Americans are fighting for birth as an abstract value. They are using all the old ghosts. They say, it is your duty to God to reproduce, or it is for the sacred future of the white race or the human species. It relies on this deep faith that existence is inherently good. It just assumes that more is always better.
And Belléglise's critique of them
Yeah.
is what's so fascinating. He doesn't argue that their ghosts are fake. He argues that their ghosts are inefficient.
This is the operational critique, and this is where the debate becomes absolutely devastating. Belléglise looks at the American model and he asks one simple question. Does it work?
And by work, he means.
It means precision. The CSE produces exactly 0 births. It is 100% precise. The American model. It produces an unknown number of births at unknown economic costs with an unknown ecological impact. It's messy. It's imprecise. It relies on chaotic human desire and feeling.
So the verdict of the text is that the authority of the divine is measured by operational efficacy and found wanting. God is a bad project manager.
In the eyes of the Brotherhood, yes. The Americans are flailing. They're invoking spirits to solve what is, for Belléglise, a logistics problem. Belléglise is just solving the problem. The Americans are praying for rain. Belléglise is building a desalination plant.
But this is where I have to push back. And the text does this too in part 7, the critique from within. I'm going to be the cynic here for a minute. If Belléglise says, we do not recognize the authority of your ghosts, and he dismisses morality, justice, and duty as ghosts, then isn't efficiency just another ghost?
Yes. The recursion.
Seriously, why is survival better than extinction if there's no morality? Why is efficiency better than waste? If you strip away all values, why even bother keeping the machine running at all? Why not just let the asteroid hit? Why not let the heat death of the universe take us?
That is the glitch. That's the crack in the monolith. The text really wrestles with this. Now, if I were to defend the system, if I were to play devil's advocate for the machine for a moment, the defense would be this. Administration presupposes survival. You cannot administer a dead population. Therefore, survival is not a value like kindness or justice. It is a prerequisite like electricity. The machine runs, so it must protect the conditions that allow it to run. It doesn't want to survive. It simply functions in order to continue functioning.
That's completely circular logic. The system must survive so that the system can survive. It's a snake eating its own tail.
It is circular, but it's a sealed circle. It's self-reinforcing. However, the text catches Belléglise in a lie.
The return of the ghost.
Exactly, because Belléglise isn't just running a machine, he is legitimating it. He uses words like righteous. The text specifically mentions that the mark is seen as sacred symbolism. It talks about the holy number. He can't help himself.
So he's sneaking the ghosts back in through the side door.
He hasn't eliminated political theology. He's displaced it. He took the holiness out of the human body and he put it into the machine. The CSE is the new altar. The pious pope is a priest without faith, mediating between the data set and the processor. He's created a religion of the object.
So it's idol worship. It's just industrial scale idol worship.
It's the worship of the instrument. When you lose the why, the how becomes sacred. If you don't know why you are living, then the mere fact that you are living efficiently, quietly, without causing trouble, that becomes the highest good. The method replaces the mission.
Which brings us to the end game, part 8, the philosophy of the end. The text describes the ultimate goal of the Brotherhood as stasis.
No growth, no decline, just stasis, just the machine, running smoothly, forever. This is the ultimate nightmare of a philosopher like Ernst Bloch. It's the elimination of the not yet.
The not yet, meaning what? The hope for something better.
The hope for difference. The hope that tomorrow will not just be a repetition of today. Belléglise wants to kill the future to save the present. He removes futurity as a category of thought. Time becomes a flat circle. Every day is the same calculation over and over.
And in doing that, he completely redefines freedom. We have to go back to subject 4471A one more time. Is she free?
The text says she is free to eat, sleep, and work. She's optimized, but she is not free to create. She is not free to start a lineage. She is, in a way, free from the burden of choice.
But then the text drops the hammer on us, on the readers, on people like us living in democracies. It asks, did liberal democracy actually offer freedom? Or did it just offer the ghost of autonomy?
And that's the sting in the tail. We like to think we're free, but are we? Or are we just subject to market forces that dictate our lives just as ruthlessly in their own way as the CSE? The market tells us where to live, what we can afford, whether we can afford to have children. The market is a machine too. It just doesn't have a visible press.
The difference is that the Brotherhood offers certainty.
Yes. Democracy is anxious. It is uncertain. You never know who will win the next election. You never know if the stock market will crash. You never know if your rights will be respected tomorrow. The Brotherhood offers the silence of the gears, 100% efficacy, zero point 0.4 seconds. It's the peace of the graveyard, perhaps, but it is peace. It's the end of anxiety.
And that brings us to the final judgment.
Yeah.
The outro. We have to circle all the way back to that opening line. We do not recognize the authority of your ghosts.
We've dissected the machine, we've looked at the pockmarked hands, and the conclusion of the source text is, I think, profound. It argues that Belléglise's refusal is itself haunted.
How so?
Because the machine crushes, and in crushing, it saves. The ashes rise, and in rising, they redeem. He has recreated the entire structure of salvation, the structure of sacrifice, the structure of the church. He has just replaced the content with steel and carbon. He's performing a mass, whether he knows it or not.
So he's trapped in the very thing he claims to deny. He's a theologian of the void.
He is. But the source leaves the listeners, you and me, with the ultimate question. It's a real dilemma.
Do we recognize in this system the truth of modernity?
Is Belléglise right? Are all our values just functions in disguise? Is justice just a fairy tale we tell ourselves to hide the sound of the gears? Is the machine simply revealing what we actually are underneath it all?
Or do we recognize the persistence of the ghosts we cannot exorcise?
Is the horror we feel when we look at the CSE, is that horror proof that the ghosts are real? That the demand for justice is not just some regulatory ideal, but an ontological fact? Does the fact that we recoil mean that there is something real to violate?
It forces a choice. Either the machine is the only truth, or the horror is the truth.
Belléglise says these are your ghosts. He says they have no authority over him.
The question is, are you ready to recognize his? Because his ghosts are made of iron, and they are already running.
And they do not stop for questions.
And that's where we leave it. The deep dive is complete. The rest, the decision, is yours. Assuming you still believe in decisions.
Good luck with that.
See you next time.